Kung Fu.
Show me.
You are the new student. Come closer.
You're listening to the Kung Fu Podcast presented by James Still.
I don't care if it's Muhammad, Imad, Bruce Lee.
And Steve Newby.
This is the original 5 Fingers of Death right here.
But my hands are registered as lethal weapons. That means we get into a fight, I accidentally kill you, I go to jail.
We are flying by the seat of our pants, literally. I mean,
Yeah.
bless him, Well, even Spielberg started off somewhere, didn't he?
Yeah, of course. So, are we recording this, are we now?
Well, we are, yeah, but,
Yeah.
Although I think we are.
I didn't know where to swear or what.
Well, do you want to keep... Well, you got to keep it PG.
Yeah, I know, but I can get quite passionate, and that's the problem.
Well,
with
I
it.
can put in a load of beeps and drill noises and stuff like that.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
I just use pneumatic equipment noises every time you swear. That's gonna be funny.
Well, to be honest with you, at the end of it, it'll sound like a building site. Yeah.
Oh, I've got to get used to the mute button. Hang on.
Was that first cough supposed to be muted?
It was, and the second cough was the second cough muted.
The second cough was muted.
That's all right. So I've got to get used to that. So that's your mute button, in case you have to sneeze or anything. Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go. So we're going to say welcome to the Kung Fu Podcast. My name's James Still, and I'm joined here today and hopefully forever with my teacher of 16 years, Mr. Steve Newby. Hi, Steve.
Hi, yeah.
Oh, that's a great intro. You sound riveted. You sound really motivated to do this.
Well, we've been working a little while to get this going, so
yeah,
I would imagine. Is it going to work? Is in your head all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is. Well, we just wing it. We'll do like we're teaching a class. Just wing it. See what happens.
Yeah, well, but we did have a little bit of experience in winging it with a class, so
yeah, I guess
you can only wing it when you know what you're doing.
No.
That's what an expert is, isn't it? An expert is someone who can literally do anything at any point in time as soon as something goes wrong.
Yeah.
The difficulty is a novice doesn't. They can't wing it.
So we've kind of jumped straight into sort of I'm an expert, you're an expert. Maybe we should sort of introduce ourselves. How about that?
Okay, so
you go. Well, do you want me to go first because I'm the least important one?
You can. Yeah, I'd like to hear some praise.
My name's no, it's all right. So it's difficult talking about yourself, isn't it? But my name's James Still. I live in the UK, place called Hereford, town called Hereford on the Welsh border, and I've been studying Lau Gar Kung Fu for the last 16 years of my life under the direct tutelage of my instructor, Mr. Steve Newby. And can I just say I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it and all that good stuff, and that's me. So that's about all I want to say about me. I don't like talking about myself. So what about you?
Well, I could talk a glass eye to sleep. I'll be frank. I started when I left the Merchant Navy. I was 21. I've always wanted to do martial arts. I did it. I was crazy about it when I was 13. The Bruce Lee era. Bruce Lee died. A program called Cinema. I saw him there, and from then on I was hooked. And I joined my first club, which just happened to be, and it wasn't a choice. It was just I just went swimming, and it just happened to be Lau Gar. and I'm really, I thank my lucky stars every day. That's what it was. And and I've been doing it ever since, from 1979 until today. But I now live in Canada.
Yeah, it's all right for some, isn't it?
Oh well, you know.
But it's worth saying. Can I just interject? It's worth saying that Lau Gar is. Would you agree? Is probably the most proliferated style of kung fu in the UK.
I would suggest it is. Yeah, I would say that probably more people teach Lau Gar outside of Lau Gar and the British Kung Fu Association than there's in it nowadays. But you know, that we can't take away the history. It has been an amazing ride and a fantastic experience of being, you know, building the British Kung Fu Association from those days onwards.
Yeah.
And and absolute total respect for my teacher, Jeremy Yao.
Yeah.
And my peers.
So it's worth so we can say Lau Gar got introduced to the UK by way of the British Kung Fu Association in 1972. That's when it first started, the BKFA. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess that's that's the general history. Master Yao was asked to become chairman of a Kung Fu association.
Yeah.
And initially it wasn't called, he didn't want anyone to use the name, so no one knew they were training Lao, and there was also segments of what had been introduced as Kung Fu at that time, because it was just everything, it was all prolific. Everybody was doing Kung Fu in their bedrooms, in their attics.
Well, it was the era of Bruce Lee, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we were getting phone calls saying, you know, can you teach me how to levitate? and so on and so forth.
Well,
so yeah, it was just crazy.
Well, before Master Yao relinquished sort of and bowed down to the pressure of, you know, what to call his style that he studied his whole life, it was actually called Bruce Lee's Kung Fu, wasn't it? It was marketed as Bruce Lee's Kung Fu.
That's right. If you go down the centre, you'll still see the signboard, the painted board, with the flying kicker of Bruce Lee doing the flying kick, and Bruce Lee's Kung Fu written on it, and that was stuck outside the the centre, which ironically was called Temple Street, in Birmingham, which is crazy, isn't it? Temple Street.
That is funny. That is funny.
Yeah.
So when did you first start? When did you walk in and do a class of Lau Gar? What was it like back in those days?
It was at Harborne Swimming Baths with Steve Faulkner. Steve Faulkner, a wonderful guy. He was I loved him to death. He was great. I just walked in and I'd bought a karate suit from a second-hand shop, or my mother bought me a karate suit.
Right.
She knew I was into it, and so I walked in and used that first, and then straight away I didn't even ask what it was about or anything. I saw the poster, walked straight in, said, how much is it to join? And it was £12, and that included the uniform and so on, which was a black with like a tunic with press studs on it.
Right. Okay.
No toggles, no buttons, just press studs.
Oh wow.
Oh no, it was funny. And straight off, I didn't ask how much. Just there it was, £12 straight. Give in straight away. Yep. Next week, got my suit and started training. There was about 40 people in the class. It was the side, you know, in a swimming pool in the old days, the old style swimming baths, public swimming baths. Both sides have got big halls all the way down the length of the swimming pool, but enclosed in their own right as halls on the side. Nowadays they're used as gyms, and in those days obviously it was our training hall. Previous to that it was full of baths, and that's where everybody used to go to have a bath.
Oh wow.
It used to have baths all the way down on the one side for men and baths all the way down the other side for the women.
Oh wow! Oh gosh! Yeah,
bathtubs.
Very cool. And what was the training? How did it sort of work in those days? Because obviously training is very different to nowadays. You know, with a lot of health and safety involved, and a lot of duty of care, and obviously, you know, that's a good thing.
Well,
back then, you know.
Yeah. No, it was. You'd go in. There was a lot of drilling, because I think drilling. The only reason martial arts is is drilled today is just a consequence of the size of the classes in those days. The only way you could get people into classes was to put them in a formation and drill the basics in them. Then after that, obviously, you broke up, you did your individual syllabus depending on what grade you were, because there was a lot of different grades all in the same class, but there was a senior class afterwards and so on. If you were late, you had to run the gauntlet. So basically you would walk into the room, realise the class had started before you got there, and then they would expect you to run right the way down to the bottom end of the class, and everybody punching and kicking you as you got down. And so you try to survive, got to the other end. So you'd start with the meek and mild, because obviously up that end were all the beginners. And then as you got down to the bottom, they would pan. they would pan you. So because they all had their own agendas, I guess.
Did people catch on pretty quick though?
You weren't late for a class too often.
Yeah, I know that.
And I never missed one. Eventually, I just started meeting my teacher, Steve Faulkner. I used to meet him at bus stops or on the side of the streets and just go to every single class he used to teach. So it's 7 days a week. It was just prolific. It was just amazing. I loved it. I just couldn't stop.
That sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah,
I can resonate with that. It's worth saying that you are quite accomplished. Not that you would say you are, but you are quite accomplished in the style of Lau Gar in the UK. You were one of the 12 original long-term members who were picked out to become what's known as guardians of the style by Master Yao. Just explain a bit about what that was, what it meant, and what that actually what it means to be a guardian. What's it?
At that time,
at
that time it was a great honour. It was a wonderful thing to be recognised.
When was this?
Personally,
what year?
It was about 2001. I think it was 2001 when we were first, introduced to that. I've still got the letter of the request actually, so I'd be able to confirm that at some point in time in the future. But I would imagine, I think it was about that time. And you just got a letter through the post asking you, I've chosen you as to help with the British Kung Fu Association, represent the British Kung Fu Association, and as a guardian, as a founder guardian, and so on. So it was a great honour. It was nice to be asked personally as well, and then we all met, and the first thing Master Yao said, I remember, he says, I don't want anyone sort of disputing the name. I've decided to call it Guardians. And then we talked about the whole process and how we were going to develop the association and how we were going to maintain the style and so on. And at the end of it, he says, has anyone got any questions? First thing I said was, can we talk about the name?
Yeah, I bet that went down well.
Oh God, I didn't like the name. I said perhaps maybe the Lao Society or something. But of course, given the history of Chinese culture and so on, the society wasn't a great
no.
in Master Yao's eyes. So.
It implies sort of gangster.
Triads and the like.
So, but if I'm looking at this from the outside, I'm gonna say it sounds a little bit too esoteric. Like, we're playing at kung fu here. Guardians. It sounds a bit funny to me. What would you say to that? I mean, what's?
I think Yao just wanted help to. It had grown far too big for one individual to to control it. It had been through its ups and downs for many, many years anyway. A lot of people had left and betrayed it. A lot of people had left for other reasons. Some people had sadly died, you know, and left areas open for their students to take over. So there were a lot of highs and lows, a lot of good areas and bad areas. There were a lot of very well reputed areas or organizations within the BKFA that had some fantastic reputation as competitors, as fighters, or as traditionalists, and had a great ability technically. And then there were others that were kind of left to their own devices and unable to find instructors anywhere, which is why I ended up teaching Scotland eventually. Over the years.
Just how far was the spread of the BKFA across the UK? I mean, just give us some sort of idea.
Oh, everywhere. It was just everywhere.
With the centre being in Birmingham, right?
Yeah, with the centre being in Birmingham, it was Glasgow, right the way through to Glasgow, Edinburgh, and then into Fife and so on. And it was right down in Cornwall. It was right down. Obviously, London was a huge area.
Yeah.
And so on, with Neville Ray and at the time Kevin Bruton, his student, various other names. There was loads of names.
So, you know, essentially the outreach of the British Kung Fu Association was literally nationwide. Where any big city you could almost find a Lau club.
Pretty much. I mean, there were... in the 70s they set up an association, or a governing body if you want,
right,
which was called the British Kung Fu Council,
right.
And a part of that British Kung Fu Council, as soon as they started it, I think there were 51 organisations that started in the British Kung Fu Council, and these were all differing, and the qualities were differing as well. Obviously you had some very, very good people, and then you had some diabolical people who still thought you could levitate. You know, so you had all sorts of qualities, and very, very good to very poor, but out of all the 51, the BKFA was larger than all the other 50 put together.
Wow. It's I get the impression at the time that the Bruce Lee boom, sort of early 70s, you had a lot of people who were trying to cash in on the Kung Fu boom. So you had a lot of karate clubs at the time who, you know, who, for example, sort of like were blocking with closed fists and, you know, big sort of movements, etc. And Kung Fu comes along and they say, right, okay, how do we want to make some money? Okay, so we'll just open our hands instead of making a closed fist and call it Kung Fu. You know, is that a fair sort of point?
In those days, if they could do anything to make it look like Kung Fu, that's what they did. And obviously it was a new thing, it was a big thing because of the death of Bruce Lee and the sudden impact of Hong Kong movies onto the scene. Everybody and their grandmother were doing Kung Fu, so you can imagine how big the classes would have been. Down in Birmingham, there was hundreds of people in one hall. And yes, it's true, that's how the BKFA started. That's how the British Kung Fu Association originally was, before Master Yao took the chairmanship. It was basically karate people opening their hands.
Yeah, so it was just another organisation, but the only difference was that, so unbeknownst to the guy who, you know, hired Master Yao, so to speak, he did actually have some level of skill.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, he was the right person for the job. He was he had all the credentials, far more credentials than most. And
so what credentials did he have? My point is, like, how you know, I mean, I respect Master Yao, but you know, couldn't he just have been making it up? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I know exactly what you mean, because I've seen that so many times. I've seen so many people, particularly Chinese people, with respect, have turned up and been 1 minute they've been, you know, nobody. The next minute, suddenly they're masters of this, that, and the other. And I know someone who has had who introduced or helped to introduce karate into the country, whereby they would get someone on a plane in Japan as a first dan, and then get off the plane in Heathrow as a fourth dan. So that's how you made it bigger than the next guy.
Seems legit to me. That seems pretty legit to me.
Well, you made it so that it was, our guys have got more experience and more power than your guys. So there you go.
Well, it's business.
Well, yeah, it was business, but at those days, a lot of the time, it was having to prove it, and often people would come and visit your school and say, oh, we do this and we do that, and Master Yao would be, pretty slick with that when people come, and there were people. I'm not going to give any direct examples because, they're absolutely. Some of the people were actually stupid. And when they'd walk in and say, I was taught by a monk in the Shaolin monastery when I was 3, and they're pure, and they're basically a Caucasian person, and then Master Yao would say, well, show me a horse riding stance, and he would tell there and then whether or not they trained, just simply by showing them a horse riding stance, because a horse riding stance is specifically a difficult thing to do, particularly if you're taller and you've got much longer thigh bones. Your horse stance is going to look much different to a Chinese guy's or a shorter guy's horse stance. But nevertheless, it's going to be pretty hard to get down there and stay down there. Other than that, he would just say, you can, if you want a challenge, you can fight my student, and the student would leave them crying on the floor, and that would be the end of that, shall we say, inverted commas, challenge.
Yeah, sure. In the early days of Lau Gar, it was kind of, it had quite a reputation for tough competitors in the fighting, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But these competitors were, I think you can, I know it sounds to people like it's contrived, but I think you can kind of assimilate that there's the same kind of history there as you would with Bruce Lee at Long Beach,
right.
And where Bruce Lee has met and started to encourage karate people to begin their training with him, or to gain information from him, or to train with him, and he's changed the concept of their fighting to the concept of speed rather than power. So they've become back fisters instead of reverse punchers. They've become dancers instead of rigid, and so on. They've moved around, and they've created what we all know today as kickboxing, as full contact kickboxing, as opposed to karate points fighting as it was at that time. And it was simply an announcer who called it kickboxing and literally coined the name kickboxing in America at that time. And so, but to explain that towards Yao, and in the UK there were a lot of big guys, big team in karate around Birmingham at the time, and basically when Master Yao was introduced to start the British Kung Fu Association, these people were introduced to him, and he started to train them in the similar kind of way of the way Kung Fu works, which is the concept of speed, and they went to the competitions as low grades in Kung Fu and annihilated the karate teams. They just absolutely wiped the floor with the competitions there, and this became I think that was the legacy. And when we turn back, as you just previously asked me, could Master Yao have just been a fraud? No, because it's his ideology, his techniques, his tactics, his strategies are all proven. They've all been proven. Right, his coaching has been proven in every avenue. In fact, the British Kung Fu Association, well, Lau Gar, not just the British Kung Fu Association, but the style of Lau Gar is really the only Chinese Kung Fu style that has ever succeeded in completely annihilating every other type of martial art, that it comes across in open competition, in fair and open semi-contact and light continuous competition, semi-contact being the most prolific and the most popular form of sport fighting at the time. It was absolutely, taking everything. It was taking every trophy. And, when you look at the development of Taekwondo afterwards, as that's come up, they and the karate were just completely embarrassed.
Right.
And I don't mean that because I'm not a fan of Taekwondo or karate. I'm just being honest in the sense that they'd go to the competitions and then they'd walk out with all the trophies, because at the time the Taekwondo were adamant about their kicks and they were being swept and back-fisted and before they could lift their legs, and karate, of course, standing there firm, bouncing around, waiting for the opportunity to do a reverse punch. They didn't get to do that reverse punch because they just didn't see it coming.
Yep.
That's as simple as that, and of course they've learned from that.
I was going to say they've evolved.
They've had to evolve. Or lose. They've had to evolve, but not only have you got karate people turning to kung fu or turning to a style of fighting similar to the kung fu, and you've got the Taekwondo who have obviously changed their tactics and a lot of them anyway, not all of them.
No.
Some of them are still, back in the dark ages, and some of them, oh my God, but I won't go into that. But I know you're a witness to that yourself, so I'm not going to go on. But basically, if they don't change, they lose. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And some of them have become extremely good, free fighters, as they've coined the phrase now, free fighters. And you'll also see Korean kickboxing, and you'll also see, karate kickboxing.
It's worth kind of making the point that people can knock point fighting, can't they, in this in this modern day and age of UFC and all the rest of it. But whether you agree with this or not, I mean, point fighters have pretty much made the foundation for some of the best full contact competitors in the history of in the modern history of the sports. I mean, you've just got to look at America, for example, and you've got people like Bill Wallace, Joe Louis, and so all these people started off in point fighting, and it's a very effective way to be introduced to timing, distance, martial strategy. What's your comments on that?
Well, if you can score a point by almost touching the person or just lightly touching the person, and although in retrospect it's not particularly light when they hit you, the simple fact is that if you have to avoid that, then you're going to be a lot lighter on your feet and a lot more agile than having to take punches constantly. You are going to be able to avoid energy much easier. And so, yes, it certainly has its advantages of being far more strategic in your footwork, far more, footloose, shall we say, far more light on your feet and so on. And timing, as you said, just getting in there and responding. You're looking for the simplest action, and your distances are just slightly off target. So it's and it doesn't take much to move straight in after the counter, I should say.
Right. Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, it can be a very beautiful sport, can't it? But it's also one of those sports that is very. You can play the game. It's particularly in the modern age today. It's very, very gamey. There's a lot of sort of referees' involvement. People stalling competitors.
But that's the same in a lot of sports. I think.
Yeah.
You're always going to get the people who stop playing the sport and start playing a game.
Right.
And that is, how much time can I have? If I throw my glove off, I'm injured. That gives me a chance to talk to the coach. That gives me an idea of finding out what the point score strategy should be, and so on. And yes, that happens in a lot of. I mean, look at footballers, for God's sake, rolling around on the floor, trying to make up time so that the injury time, so they get more chance to get their goals back, and so on. It's the way of the world, I guess. It's the way of people today. But yes, gamey. If that's what gamey is, then it's damn gamey.
So I got a question. What makes Lau Gar a traditional martial art? Because you think of something like Wing Chun or a very classical, I don't know, kung fu style, say Hung Gar or something. You see them doing the forms, and it looks very kung fu-y, and you see it represented a lot in movies, etc. You don't really hear about Lau Gar that much. So why is that, and what makes it an effective traditional style not above, but I don't know, compared to other styles, for example, kung fu styles? What's the differences? What classify Lau Gar?
Well, the first and foremost important thing to say that it is exactly the same as all those styles you mentioned. It comes from exactly the same place. It's built in the same way. It's one of 5 ancient styles, namely Lao, obviously, and then Hung Gar, which is quite a famous one, Mok, and Choi and Lee. These things, these are all traditional styles, and Wing Chun, of course. If you look at Wing Chun's first set, Sil Lim Tao, you'll see it very similar to the first 2 forms in Lau Gar. The one thing that makes it different simply is it is moved with the times, which has made it adapt to modern style fighting. And so it doesn't mean to say that it's lost its tradition. It means to say that many of the the appeal of many people in modern times is that it can be a very fluid fighting style, which has, as I've already said, dominated a lot of other more rigid styles. And so the benefits in that are manifold, and obviously people who are very much into the sport would have taken it and popularized it far more than the avid traditionalists. But that doesn't mean to say that it's lost its traditionalism. It hasn't. If it wasn't for the traditionalism, there would have been no success. It's just simply that traditionalism, those traditional tactics, those naturally useful tactics and strategy, have been used to accomplish what other people would have thought unthinkable in the 70s. They didn't see it coming, but I think a lot of schools they saw the appeal, they saw the financial benefits, and they took it that direction. Those people who were less interested in the financial benefits, if you like, or less motivated by that, tended to be far more involved in the traditionalism of it. But some people in martial arts, and this has always been a problem with Chinese martial arts, and sometimes with karate as well, in the sense that some people take the traditionalism far too far.
You mean like teaching people to fly?
Yeah, well,
or are you talking about
believing in legends, believing in spirituality that that would be part and parcel, if you like, of the 60s kind of interest. I want to be a tree kind of thing, and they are really trying to emulate the kind of stuff you see in movies, where where the guy turns into a bird and flies away, kind of thing, martial art.
Right.
And they lose the whole concept of what traditionalism means. Now, to some people, of course, traditionalism means total respect for your parents, total respect for your teacher, dedication to the art, and all that sort of thing. Well, of course, those things go without saying, but they tend to replace the actual tactics and strategy with fluid and exaggerated movements, not just emulating what they see as traditionalism, but they're getting their traditionalism a lot of the time from Chinese movies.
Right.
And they start to, there's a line that's crossed where the actual martial art becomes martial movement, and it starts to completely lose its essence and its reality. So unfortunately, that's what has given Kung Fu, in effect, a bad reputation in modern times.
Oh, it's not got a good reputation, has it? And none at all.
Because people just but they can't fight.
Yep.
Of course they can fight. Of course they have fought, and of course they have won. The problem they've got is, traditionalism or traditional martial arts is dirty fighting. Okay,
yep.
It cannot be done in an enclosed environment in order to completely obliterate the opponent. Okay, in other words, to injure them, because it will be a very violent and very dangerous environment. No one can do that. It would be totally illegal anyway. Pugilism, to that degree, is illegal in any country. But that's why semi-contact was so popular, because you didn't need to annihilate an opponent to prove you could hit him before he could see you hit him. So if you just change that, and you've got to hurt the guy, he's not going to see that punch, he's not going to see that kick. The whole concept of martial arts is, or rather Kung Fu if you like, is to be invisible.
Yeah.
And once that is established, all these big movements you see people practicing, if you watch, and this is an interest to me, if you watch a black sash training, not teaching, but if you see him training and he continues to practice the form in the same way he was taught it, then he has not learned anything, because he has not digested that form. He needs to practice it over a period. I'm not talking about people who've just become black sashes or whatever, where they have to remain vigilant when it comes to teaching the style in the way that it's meant to be taught. If you look at it in the same way as we always describe when I'm teaching the ABC concept, which is when you're a child, you are taught how to write an A and a B and a C, and you learn the alphabet, but that is because of your muscle memory. You write it on a big board with a piece of chalk or whatever. It takes up half your page in your book. It quite obviously develops so that eventually it becomes handwriting, it becomes smaller but still readable.
Yep.
Now, some people's handwriting is not readable, just the same as some people's Kung Fu is not eligible, because they do not understand it themselves half the time, or they are trying to go too fast for themselves, which is what a lot of people do when they write. They understand it themselves, but no one else can read it. Well, what's the point of that? There's no point in learning to read and write if you can never show people, or get people to be able to read your writing. Your writing has got to be eligible for everybody. And so your Kung Fu has got to be taught to be eligible. So that's why it's in big letters initially and big words, and then as you develop, it should become smaller. So going back to that black sash, by the time that black sash is experienced teaching and has experienced a lot of training, his forms should flow much more, they much be faster because the movements will be shorter but not less effective. When I say shorter, he's not going to punch shorter, he's going to make the punch work at the same range but develop from further out, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
And so the technique becomes shorter and faster.
Yeah.
And therefore more invisible to the person that is doing it to.
Okay, so if I'm playing devil's advocate here, why isn't Kung Fu in MMA? If it's that good. And by the way, it's legible.
Yeah. Very legible, like big handwriting.
There you go.
Like big ABC. Just take a look at it. If you want to lie and sit on someone's face for 20 minutes, then do it, by all means. But then the next year you're going, how can I stop someone sitting on my face? Oh, I know, I'll punch and kick. But the point is, you see, let's just, okay, it's not there. Why? Because you have to adhere to someone else's rules. Now, in the event, and I said to you earlier, it's dangerous and it's violent and it's not meant to be, in its total essence, it's not meant to be a sport, it's meant to be a self-defense. So if someone's going to, if they actually get to grab you, you should have hit them before they grabbed you, but if they do get to grab you, you must escape at that point in time.
Yeah.
And,
I know what you're talking about, but isn't that a cop-out? Like, how many times do you see a crap style of martial arts on YouTube, whatever, where they turn around and say, yeah, but we don't compete because what we do is too deadly? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we do compete.
Yeah, we do compete. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So
yeah, we compete in a safe environment, okay? Yeah. Now, if you want to call MMA a safe environment, it's safe for the people that invented it. It's safe for the, to a degree, to the people who want to participate in that kind of sport. But let's just go back to that point where the guy has grabbed you and you're lying on the floor and politely going, now I'm going to have to try to get out of this because I'm now in a lock. And of course, once you're in a lock and once you're in a hold on the floor with a heavy person, of course, to everyone's degree, it's going to be very hard. Just ask the losers. It's going to be extremely difficult for people to get out of that situation unless you're going to grab his nuts, you're going to bite his face, you're going to poke him in the eyes, you're going to rub his face in the floor, and generally everything you can possibly do, including stick your thumb up his ass, because if you're going to allow someone to stick their thumb up your ass and still try to hold them in a sport, then you're a better man than me.
I don't know, sign me up. Sounds great.
I'm not dissing MMA. If they want to do it, they can do it. But what I don't want is for people to perceive martial arts or MMA or UFC to be the ultimate fighting. It's not.
Well, you just got to count the rules in the rule book for that. Yes. At the end of the day, people want to go back home the next day and back to work. So whatever they decide to do in martial arts, let's face it. If you're not a sort of top realm athlete and a prize fighter, so to speak, you want to go home to work the next day, don't you?
Yeah, because the thing is, there are several reasons why you would fight. Most people would avoid a fight like the plague. Okay, if you want to fight, it's just your way of, demonstrating your if you like masculinity or femininity or whatever, if you want to call it or feminine masculinity, I don't know. But the point is that if you want to fight and you fight someone who wants to fight, then it is a test of skill. There is no doubt about that in the sport. But if you want to survive above and beyond, then you are not going to adhere to other people's recommendations. You are going to, their rules. You are going to fight to survive. And fighting to survive is a totally different aspect than fighting in a sport. Okay, now, as I said, most people, well, let's put it this way. Everybody will kill to save themselves. Pretty much everybody will kill to save their loved ones. That's the only reason they'll fight, okay, when they need to, when they have to, when they have no choice. There's going to be now some people, they won't switch like that. They'll be passive right to the last second and sometimes too late.
Sure, yeah.
Others will turn in a second, in an instant, and they will change and they will fight. And I mean, take a look at, the situations you've got where a fighter is totally dominant, and suddenly, just because of the way it works out, the other guy sucker punches him.
Right.
The other guy finds a way out of that hold. The other guy smacks him as he moves. No one expects to be hit. It's just, so in sport, there's a massive element of luck. Of course, it takes them an awful lot of training to get that element of luck.
Sure.
But if you look at survival, it's a totally different ball game. And I mean, again, I talked to you previously about looking at lion footage in Africa, and when you see a lion determined to kill its meal, and it's there and it's out to get it, and it's well versed in its ability, it's well armed, and there it is, straight at this passive animal. The next thing you know, it gets kicked in the face, breaks his jaw, starves to death. And it's as simple as that. Okay, it happens, right? So when people attack you, providing you're willing to fight back and you have the skills in which to do it, and it just so happens those animals tend to be, fairly hefty when they fight back. But there are some. Have you ever seen a badger? Jesus Christ!
Or a
I'm
skunk.
talking. Yeah. These people are. These animals, sorry, they are fighting back, and they are aggressive. I mean,
what about a wild cat? And that is a segue for you. Here's a segue for you, because wild cats, right? Really aggressive. Master Yao, didn't he have to catch a wild cat as part of his sort of training?
Yes,
a long time ago.
Yes, with his grandfather, as he was to become the head of the style, as his grandfather was old, he was asked to. He was in a single room with a dark room, and his grandfather attacked him with a knife, a Chinese hatchet, and he would attempt to defend himself. Okay, and in that time, of course, he couldn't hurt or kill his grandfather, but he had to defend himself. And the other one was his ability to defend himself. Where else was it now? There was something else. Yeah, with the cat, he was left in a room and the cat was slapped and just thrown at him, and he had to try to arrest this cat without hurting it. He had to try to prevent this cat from hurting him. And yeah, it's quite a feat. Now I've taken a kitten to the vets, and this. Bear in mind, this is a feral cat that was found in where they built the Rover cars in Birmingham. Yeah. And in Leyland, it became Rover, and later BMW. And anyway, these cats were living all over the place. My wife had the great idea to bring one of these kittens home, and so we had to get it vaccinated. We took it to the vet, and all the noises you could hear from the inside. It was like a horror movie. It was sickening. Yeah. And then this nurse came back with this cat, and her hands were covered in scratches and blood and everything. She just could not contain this cat. And this was a kitten, right? a little kitten, and this thing went crazy, and this nurse was ripped to shreds, her hands were torn to shreds, and she just gave us this cat back and says we can't do anything with it.
Oh, this is perfect. It sounds perfect.
Yeah.
You don't see that in the Jackie Chan film, though, do you?
Yeah,
you know what, you see it in Rocky. I think he had to chase a chicken in Rocky, but you know.
Yeah, well, these are traditional tests, you know. I mean, the one test is an example from Shaolin where you're attacked with several people with long poles, and you've got a chair, right, and you've got to defend yourself against them without hurting them. I think the concept here, or the whole sort of trait, is the ability to fight people without hurting them. That was the original concept of Shaolin fighting.
Yeah, it's
because they were monks. Yeah. So they didn't want. They had no intention to hurt someone. They only had the intention to prevent them from hurting themselves. You know them.
Yeah, so it's like avoid instead of hurt instead of maim instead of kill. That sort of Buddhist progression, that escalation. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is something that is a wonderful thing to be able to do, if at all we could practice hard enough to be able to.
I was going to say, it sounds very, very sort of esoteric, and how great would it be? You know, I can just, avoid all these attacks and stuff. But no one trains that hard, do they? Nobody. In this day and age, no one trains that hard.
No, but this is the issue. If we lose the traditional concept, if we lose the ability to teach every aspect of the traditional arts, the historical art, by saying, for instance, I can't do that, so I'm not going to practice it, and therefore I'm not going to teach it. If you can't practice something, doesn't mean to say you can't necessarily teach it. And let's face it, all you've got to do is ask Tyson about his manager,
Gus D'Amato,
and ask him the same question, because I don't see Gus D'Amato doing the things that Tyson did, but he can still make him a fighter.
Teach the guy,
right? Yeah. And so, just because you can't do the things anymore, or whether you did them before, doesn't mean to say you have to discard them. They must stay. So the style must stay firm and full.
Yeah, but you're talking specifically about styles, right? And traditionalism. But what you've actually done there is just taken a crap all over Jeet Kune Do. But no, I think you have,
okay.
and because as we all know that Bruce Lee's martial art Jeet Kune Do was what did he say? Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, blah blah blah, all the rest of it. And he was, if it doesn't work, I'm not going to teach it. Why do a form? It doesn't have any sort of combative application for me. I'll just go and hit a bag for an hour. Fair enough. So
well, exactly, fair enough. It depends on his build, it depends on his attitude and so on. But what of the people that trained with him? What of the people? Where are they? Do they do what he did? Did they do when he died what he did? No, they didn't. They made everything else up themselves, the way that they saw it, the way that they wanted it to happen. Yes, they used his concepts. They used the concept of speed, and applications and so on, but they didn't use the same styles. And then what you see from Jeet Kune Do is a proliferation of loads and loads of different martial arts all over the place, whatever the background the person came from. If he moved into what he could consider to be Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do, it would never have looked like what Bruce Lee did,
because he's a different build, different age, different sex, so it's all
a different attitude, and a different amount of knowledge. Now, Bruce Lee had a very, very good understanding and a massive library as well, one of the biggest libraries of martial arts in the world, and the whole point is he studied well, and he trained hard. Very few people trained in the same way that he did, but he had one I guess direction, one wish, and that was to develop in his own way his style, but let's just take a look at that. Let's just look at the times that he was doing it in, the place that he was doing it in. He came to America on his own. He got into college. He was training his martial art. He was completely and utterly saturated with Chinese culture around him, who totally did not want him to teach. Yeah, the Guolai.
The Guilos, the White Devils.
The Guilos, Guilos are, word. Chinese, eh? Yeah. So, a lot of people learn Chinese. They learn Chinese because they think then they look more impressive when they teach.
How can you be a master if you don't know Chinese?
Yeah, but the thing is, there are 30 different dialects and 30 different provinces, bigger than the UK. How can you possibly learn? There are some great linguists about that can speak several different languages, but not kung fu people.
No.
They just they might want to learn the language if they want. That's fine. It doesn't make you a better martial artist.
No.
Just because it comes from China. So did gunpowder. Look what happened to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Chinese didn't do anything about it, did they? Yeah. No. So it's just that's the way it is, But yeah, there are a lot of people. But going back to Bruce Lee, just imagine you're in an area like that and you are fighting. He didn't win every fight. It's common knowledge that he injured himself, and of course people say, yeah, the guy hit him in the back after the fight, and put him in hospital. Yeah, well, we're not going to ever know what happened there, right? But the whole point is that if I was Bruce Lee, no matter how good you are, you're going to think, wait a minute, sooner or later someone's going to stab me in the back. Right?
Well, or get shot, and that was his sort of,
Yeah,
I mean, he's in America,
that was his
for
big
God's
fear.
sake. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's going to have to comply, to a degree, whether he likes it or not, with the wishes of the people around him, who have been there a lot longer and have probably got all the weaponry they need. They don't need to give a toss about traditionalism. They just want to make sure that, their parents' wishes or their guardians' wishes or their master's wishes are considered against this newcomer. So that newcomer, he's going to have to change the concept, which is why he didn't call it Wing Chun, although he trained Wing Chun. He called it something else.
He trained Wing Chun allegedly for about 4 years, didn't he? He didn't put his time in. With all due respect to the guy, I mean,
I think he trained it a lot. I wouldn't suggest that he didn't put his time in. I agree that it was a short period of time, but within that short period of time, I would argue that he put every hour he could into it, and that's what made him good. So, but I believe that his decision was not martial. His decision was political to call it something else, and in calling it something else, he had to show that it was different. He had to prove that it was different.
But what I would put to you is, was it different? If we're teaching Kung Fu, in terms of the fighting strategies and concepts, was it different? It wasn't.
No.
Because let's face it, he started with Kung Fu and he finished with Kung Fu. I mean, is that a fair point?
Yes, it is a fair point, and I agree with you. It wasn't different, but I didn't say that it wasn't different. I said he needed it to be different. He had to show to them that he was not teaching their, I guess, martial art to, the Guilo, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
The white ghosts, the people, the Westerners. Yeah. He had to prove, in one way or another, and in his own terms, he wants to be at the forefront of everything. So he wants to invent his own way. He wants to make it work. He wants to prove it works, and that's why he provided so much, promotion of it, if you like. But of course, being an actor, he was in a perfect situation to do that. And when he appeared on, some of these TV shows in America where he was teaching the blind guy.
Yeah, that was Longstreet,
and so on, and he's giving the concepts of the way he's fighting. I mean, if you look at his jumping, when he's doing his sidekick there, you don't see many traditional Wing Chun people doing a step behind sidekick. It's taught just as it's taught in Lau, but it's not necessarily something you would do in the street unless the person was already injured. You know, because it takes so long to perfect, it takes so long to develop in the moment of the fight. If you try to do, I mean, I've been in competitions where my students have come to me and they go, "Oh, look at that guy! He can do this flying kick and that. He can do spilling kicks and can hold his leg up for 10 minutes and throw his legs 60 times a minute, or whatever." And I'm saying to him, "Look, okay, he's going to fly at you. He can only fly in a straight line."
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't say any more than that. All that happened is the guy looked there, screamed, jumped at him, jumped in the air. My guy just moved to the side, punched him straight in the head, and the point taken. You know, and the guy stopped jumping after a while. Yeah. And the guy with bouncing around on one leg, chasing you around the ring on one leg. Yeah. I said to my man, I said, you know, all you got to do is wait for him to put his leg down. You know, just dance around with him. And sure enough, he's dancing around, sticking his leg up in these side kicks, you know, and my guy was just slightly out of range, just moving. The guy put his leg down, bam, straight off.
Yeah.
Scored point. That's it. You know, the guy gets tired eventually. You know, so you can do all sorts of amazing flying, backward somersaults and everything, and it looks great on a movie. But speed is the essence, and although it can be quite confusing when someone can throw some amazing kicks from all directions and double kicks and triple whammies and so on, you've got to be there, right? The guy has got to be able to hit you when you're a moving target, and that is not easy.
Yeah.
So don't make it easy for him. So standing and admiring his kicks as they come at you. Don't make it easy.
Yeah, I mean, so going back to sort of Bruce Lee, that was his sort of message, wasn't it? In his in the films, certainly. Like you look at The Game of Death, which was his last film, wasn't it? Where he's sort of having to move around a lot. You know, he's on the balls of his feet. He's he's competition fighting. That's, you know, but it's not competition fighting. It's just fighting. I get that, but it was an interesting message. Yeah.
It's a development of competition fighting. Yeah. It's a development of competitive fighting in the Chinese sense of the word, or in the traditional, semi-contact sense of the word. Yeah. You know, he could see that, but don't forget, he also was a ballroom dancer, and he was a very good dancer, and therefore he was going to be light on his feet.
Not everyone is going to be light on their feet.
No, that's right, and therefore that's why, you know, Jeet Kune Do doesn't really survive that well. It's all over the place. I mean, tomorrow I could open a club called Jeet Kune Do.
Yeah.
Right, and it wouldn't mean a thing. Because it just I'm going to take this style, and I'm going to use punches from this style, and then I'm going to be boxing, so I'm going to use these kind of hooks and uppercuts and whatever boxing style. Then when I've learned that, I'm going to learn to throw, so I'm going to join a judo club and learn to throw. Then I'm going to go and sit on your face, so I'm going to do some jiu-jitsu and so on and so forth.
No, it's not. You're not knocking these arts, but it's just when people are sort of.
I'm knocking the people that try to develop themselves by going to these arts and learning what they are specifically training.
Yeah, but people aren't learning a lot, and they're sort of, you know, dabbling, aren't they? And then they're going back and they're sort of they're putting it together in a pot and saying, I've learned this idea on that idea, and it eventually just becomes, you know, a complete mess.
Yeah, it coagulates. It's like. But it's like water and oil sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And it just isn't going to happen. It's like bad milk in tea. It just will come up in lumps, and that's just the way it is. And the point is that I think the whole essence of this conversation is if somebody can maintain their style, maintain the history of their style. Historic nature includes the strategy, the tactics, the concepts of fighting, which are let's face it, that's what martial arts is. It's a fighting way of survival. And if you are going to maintain those and not just call yourself a traditionalist, but be capable of fighting in whatever manner your ability takes you, that is to say your training, which if it is traditional has been proven on battlefields and in the street for thousands of years, don't knock it, because if you knock it, you're knocking yourself, because if you knock it, everything you learned has come from previous generations. So you can't knock traditionalism or traditional martial arts. The only way you knock traditional martial arts is where someone actually isn't doing traditional martial arts. They're just taking bits from it and calling it, but it's really just traditional movement or martial movement. It's not even real. And that's where, I went to a club not long ago, doing punches, multiple punches, jig-joy, straight punches out, 10 at a time, 10 at a time, 10 at a time. You look at the instructor, the punches are rolling around and they're not going anywhere. They're not actually reaching any target. So, how can someone in reality claim to be capable of punching and then demonstrate that they can't? That's the difficulty I have, and of course when you go back to these people who have learned all these multiple styles, had they have stayed with a traditional style, with the one style, they'd have learned all those things, because surely traditional styles, they don't have limitations. It's you that creates the limitations.
I think today you look at the word traditional, and I think it has become kind of synonymous with the way you train, as opposed to talking about strategies and tactics. For example, you go into a class and, we're a traditional martial art, I'm going to punch punch a hot sand bowl, build up iron palm, and for an hour, but and then you look at, say, a boxing gym or something, you walk through the doors and it's straight away get skipping, get punching that bag. So you're actually doing something useful. And it doesn't mean that doing all this iron palm training is useless. What I'm saying is, if you're only training for 2 hours a week and you're going to spend 1 hour of that doing all these exercises instead of throwing punches, hitting pads, or breaking down forms, etc., then how is that useful? So it has the word traditional become sort of more associated with the way you train something, as opposed to the strategies and tactics.
Well, I think both of those things would have been used or useful in many cases in most martial arts through time, where you are using a bag, or using a person, because let's face it, a lot of times they would have used a person, and first thing you learn when you learn a kung fu style is you're sent off to get the makeup of a recipe. You create that recipe, and that is your protection. When you get a bruise, it's your healing mechanism. You're there to apply a bloody poultice. You're there to apply lineaments or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
I think so. Liniment. Dip
whatever.
Dip Darjiao, the stuff that smells like whiskey.
Well, that depends on what you distill it in, but mine's in vodka. But the point is that if that's what you learn first, and then you get a good punch on you and you go, bloody hell, that was great, you hit me really good, and then you got a big bruise there, and that's what you require that recipe for in the early days. But so because it was hard to come in touch with a good bag unless it was filled with sand, in which case it's going to break your hand, which is why people ended up with hard hands. But the point is, today there are a lot of classes that will say, okay, tonight is our night of hard training, of conditioning training. So we're going to be clashing wrists, arms, we're going to be kicking each other's shins, and it's going to hurt, but eventually you'll get used to it. Well, I've got to tell you, no, you will not.
Well, you've got to be doing it every week, haven't you?
You've got to be doing it every frigging day, if not every hour. Okay, let's look at it this way. You want to learn to play the guitar. You pick it up, you play it for an hour. At the end of that hour, your fingers are burning with they've got indentations in them, they are painful, and you can't play anymore. So you leave it for a week, come back the next week, guess what? Same thing's going to happen, because you haven't practiced in that time. Now, a guitarist has to practice every day, and eventually their fingers will become a lot harder on the ends, simply because they have trained. That is conditioning, constant training, right? But surely that constant training would be to the end product. That is to say that if you're going to be punched, punch and get punched, which is what they did. But the point is, clashing and banging shins against each other, surely we're trying to avoid that. Surely a parry or a dissipation of energy is far better than constantly clashing against energy. If only, I have to say this, if you're not doing it every day.
Well, I would sort of suggest as well that if you're a small statured female in a class full of big burly blokes, you're not going to want to do that sort of training. You're just not. And how does that benefit you if sort of martial arts are meant to be for everybody, but you know what are you going to learn? You're not going to want to do, are you?
That's the problem, and unfortunately, yes, there are two different arguments here. I guess on the one hand, you can hear the one, crazy, really regimented guy go, then the girl shouldn't be in the class because it's about being hard, it's about being strong, it's about being fast and so on. So the girl isn't going to survive unless she's going to comply. But of course, on the other hand, you can turn and say, well, wait a minute, the girl needs it more than you do. If she can train, and she can train in a way that she doesn't require that, and she can beat you because she trains to hit you, and she doesn't train like to take your hit, then there is a different strategy there. Do you see? There is a different, but both of them may be useful to one or the other. But and as an example, I can give you a simple example of the British Navy or the English Navy against the Spanish Armada, and those little boats were no match for the Armada. Those little English ships didn't carry the same amount of firepower. They had nothing. You know what they did? They had strategy, and all they did was set one on fire and sent it straight into the middle of the Armada, and they scattered. So it's about strategy. It's not about full-on impact. I hate movies where you get two armies facing each other and they just go, let's go for it, and they just go charge, and they just go for it, and they just smack straight into each other and then start fighting. Well, what about that initial smack? You're going to lose half the people straight off there. You've got to create better tactics, and of course those tactics, earlier tactics, well, they're not as good as tactics whereby you can win by stealth and far less losses. So the woman will win by stealth, the man will win by brawn if he trains like that, but all that brawn is not going to help if he can't see it coming. Speed is the essence.
But it also goes back to what you were saying about the on the wild plains of Africa with the lion versus the wildebeest. There's an element of luck there. Nothing is given, but it depends on your training, right?
So I'm afraid we talk about tradition, and yet many of the aspects cannot continue to be taught, if you like, in terms of the training, not in terms of the strategy, not in terms of the tactics, not in terms of the techniques. I'm talking about the terms of training, where unless you are prepared to clash shins every other hour for 3 months, or more, then unless you're prepared to sit in a horse stance for 30 minutes at a time, you are not going to be that strong. So you have to adapt the style to suit your training regimen and your physique. So doesn't mean the tradition is lost. It means that the training element is not taught, is not done by you, but maintain a certain amount of training, and you'll be able to sustain, what's called traditional style forever. But for me, the traditional style is the tactics, the strategy, and the training of the techniques. It's not the traditional empowerment of men and banging each other to death for all day, because I'm afraid that you can't keep that.
No,
you can't keep it unless you're going to go in some place somewhere and just do it every day. I'm sorry, you can't do it. And don't tell me that it's done at Shaolin, because Shaolin has been dead for 200, 300 years.
Yeah.
And people keep on saying, well, I go to Shaolin to train. Yeah, you'll go train, okay. There's plenty of Chinese guys there waiting to take your money. If you want to go there and wear an orange suit and buy a flappy sword, then you can go do that. And now I've been to Shaolin and I've watched 72 different styles, 72 different Kung Fu schools around the Shaolin area, right? And you see these people walking around in their orange suits, as if they have been trained, but they're great athletic, athletic ability.
Yeah, it's wushu.
But,
it's wushu. That's what it is.
Yeah, as far as technical training is concerned, I'm sorry, no. Most of them don't know what they're doing. And jump over a springboard, no problem. I've watched them do it, but unfortunately, it's not the same.
Well, it's. I remember reading on Wikipedia. I mean, that's obviously it must be true then. But the abbot of the Shaolin monastery got done for solicitation with prostitutes and stuff like that. And it's just like, hang on, that wasn't in the TV series with David Carradine, was it?
No,
Master Po wasn't going off to the back room with But
well, wait a minute. How do you think he got blind?
Oh, that's true.
Okay, so I went to Shaolin, and the best place I ever went to from Shaolin was just down the street, down the road, and it was called the Pagoda Forest, and basically it's the cemetery for the monks and abbots of the Shaolin monastery.
But the real, the old,
the original ones there, because they were all shifted in after the revolution in 1947. No one was allowed to do kung fu, and probably before that they were trying to stop it. But at that point in time, they got rid of everybody. They got rid of the whores. They got rid of the bloody half the teachers. They got rid of.
Sorry, they got rid of what? The whores.
Yeah, hookers.
What? Oh, the hookers. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, they got rid of all them. They got rid of a lot of teachers. They got, they changed the whole concept of, became a very socialist, communist country. And the first thing to go was the kung fu experts as well. Yeah. And they recognized the importance of the traditionalism, so they maintained the athleticism of it, but they would not let anybody use any real weaponry, and they would not let anybody have real training in the sense of actual fighting. No. So it ended up as an athletic sport, and it became a national athletic sport known as wushu.
Yeah.
But that's where everybody went to Hong Kong, and that's why Hong Kong proliferated not only in martial arts, but also in martial movies as well.
Sure, for real. I mean, you look at China now. Wushu is very, very proliferated across it. Like I said, it's a national sport. But it's fair to say as well that Taekwondo is probably more popular in China. Because of course it's an Olympic sport, more popular than Kung Fu right now.
Because they took everything out of Kung Fu that worked, and now they're allowing Taekwondo to be taught, and of course kickboxing as well. Kickboxing is very popular
MMA,
in China, and so that's another reason you've lost the essence of the Kung Fu, because it has this history that people don't recognize. It has been really crapped on in terms of let's face it, everybody runs from China anyway. They go to Hong Kong, they're new in Hong Kong, they maybe have trained a little bit of Kung Fu. The next thing you know, they're teaching everybody as masters.
Yeah.
Just the same situation as when they came to the West, because literally they were going to the West because Hong Kong was owned by the UK, by Britain at that time. So when they go there, they can pick up students, no problem, and they can fool those students, and because they'll know a little bit of martial art, but they're not necessarily going to be, great teachers. And very quickly, you'll get generation after generation of worse and worse martial artists. And today, there are good martial artists, few and far between.
Yeah.
And but that's across the world now, because that is so prolific, and people think, well, if I go back to the origin, if I go back to Shaolin,
I'll learn
surely
something,
I'm gonna go back to the origin. No, you're not, because that isn't the origin.
No, I mean,
it was gone from there a long time before.
Well, Kung Fu is, as far as I'm concerned, in Shaolin certainly. I mean, and there were quite a few temples of Shaolin, weren't they? But if you're searching for Kung Fu, do not search at Shaolin. It does not exist there anymore. But
there were a lot of Shaolin. I was going to just say there were a lot of temples, but then Shaolin just means small forest.
Yeah.
It's just the area where the actual Shaolin. Yeah. But there are several other temples, as you rightly say.
And but I would probably suggest that there are somewhere in China, maybe deep underground or whatever. There's probably some class somewhere where someone has some knowledge, which but they're not going to come out the woodwork, are they? It's
I don't doubt there's a lot of, but it's really proliferated across a lot of different people. There's probably a lot of people that know certain things, and then other people know others. And if you were to get them all together again, you'd probably rebuild an awful lot of historical abilities, technical abilities.
Yeah, but I watched this documentary on YouTube about this karate guy, and he was traveling. Basically, he wanted to travel to China to find the origins of karate. And he landed in China, and of course everybody he met is a master. He's a master of this, he's a master of that. You got to follow the white crane on the at the sunrise at 12 o'clock, and all that sort of stuff. And the poor guy, I was left thinking, what has he actually discovered? What has he found out about the origins of karate? Not a lot. But of course he believed that he's met this master, that master, because everybody's a master in China. So what makes someone a master? I mean, it's a pretty sort of highest a title that is thrown around a lot, isn't it? But it's
more so today than any other time. What makes a master? The problem, that is a big problem. Certainly for me in Canada as well, it's a major problem, because everybody's a bloody master, and you look at them, and I think their second name's Beta. So all I can say to you is, I've met some really nice people. I haven't met brilliant martial artists. I've met masters, right? As simple as that. Yeah. But I've met some really nice people who are really devout and really determined and really dedicated. But I just wish sometimes that they would open their eyes a little bit, because they're just going completely in the wrong direction. But maybe for the right reasons, maybe they're just trying to feed their family, and that's what it is. But if you look at Hong Kong at that time, let's face it, all they wanted to do was feed their families, and so they would teach anything they liked, and we're left with the legacy today. So very, very few. And I did say earlier that if you stayed with the traditional style, surely you would learn everything. Well, you've got to be lucky, first off, to find a traditional style, and I was lucky at least to find a genuine, authenticated style of Kung Fu, which in the end it's down to you to discover the actual concept of that style. But it was always forthcoming, it was always there, it was always going to be available. But 3 secrets in martial arts, of course, as you know: to train harder, and to train harder still. Oh crap! I've just given you all the secrets of martial arts. It's terrible.
Well, on that note, we're probably gone over our time here, and I think we can certainly expand on some of those points on our next podcast. But Steve, I'd just like to really thank you for joining us, and hearing what you've had to say. It's been great, as always.
Great fun. Yeah, and you know what? I didn't swear once. I don't think.
No, you did. I don't think you did either. No, that was. I'm pretty impressed.
It's amazing.
Pretty impressed.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay. Thanks.
Anyway, well, thanks for joining us, gang. We'll see you soon on another episode of the Kung Fu Podcast. My name's James Still, and I'm joined as always by Steve Newby. Take care. Bye bye now. Thank you so much for joining us on the Kung Fu Podcast. If you enjoyed that and would like to find out more about us, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube under SJN Martial Arts. That's SJN Martial Arts. And please take time to like us, share us, and subscribe to us. We'll see you soon on the next episode of the Kung Fu Podcast. Take care now.